one deal. Folks, actually the Assistant Secretary of Defense goes to Israel, signs a deal which says that if United States sells any type of weaponry, whether to Saudi Arabia or to Egypt or to any one of those countries in the Middle East, that we, the United States, will have to give Israel a better piece of equipment so that the
can
other countries...
the military edge over
That's right, a military edge.
So there's clear favoritism in some regards. I think, that he's clearly pointing to that in his write-up. Whether or not we take that on a personal front to say, wow, he's, very anti-Israel or not, I don't think it's about that.
Oh, no, he's not anti-Israel at all.
It's about, look, this is how the government is spending its money in this one area for this one country. And as citizens of this country, is that something that we want to continue to do the way I've been doing for the last several decades?
Yeah.
Or is it time for change? If the entire country is forced to make tough choices because of our economic crisis, our economic condition, shouldn't we look at everything? And of course,
I think we should ask those Republican candidates on their debates, what do you think of this $3 billion a year?
I think it will show up in the upcoming debates, and I expect this to be somewhat of a hot-button topic, but we should not, as an American populace, we should not shy away from hot-button topics. We so quickly tend to be reactive to these things, and as you said, quick to label against such efforts, but we ought to really open our minds and think logically about what we're doing, not just be stuck in our corners ideologically about what we're doing as a nation.
I think I commend Washington Post. Time to time, people have labeled it anti-Semite, but they're not anti-Semite. This type of information comes into the public domain, and then public makes a decision because, let's face it, there's a super committee sitting, right? They're
making choices.
Yeah.
They're making priority decisions, and of course, this, like anything else, has to come up to that priority decision process.
That's right. They want to cut $1.9 trillion, right? Now, folks, this is 2%.
It could be.
This is 2% of that $1.9 trillion. This can easily get cut.
Well, it could get cut. I would say that, if in the next coming weeks, let's say the Post did a series of these things and said, this is what we do for Israel, this is what we do for China, this is what we do for Pakistan.
Yeah.
It could expose to some degree how we operate with these countries one by one and let the public decide what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And that way they can better evaluate candidates to figure out, okay, which side of the fence are these candidates really on? What are they going to support?
Because there's been a tendency to say, well, foreign policy, it has to be behind a curtain. Well, it doesn't need to be behind a curtain. By the way, folks, I was talking about $1.9 trillion of budget cuts. That's over a 10-year period. So $3 billion a year over a 10-year period is $30 billion. $30 billion and $1.9 trillion is roughly about 2%. I really think that all of these things should be on the table.
I think so. I think we should, the more we know as a nation about how our country operates, the better equipped we are to make better decisions going forward. I was curious, in India while you were there, did you see any sign of these Occupy Wall Street movements? This is a phenomenon, folks. You've been watching it on the news, I'm sure. Basically, this movement has gained considerable momentum, so much so that it has actually doubled every 3 days since it got started, which, it started in New York, but now it is in every major city across the U.S. In fact, it's gone global.
Yes.
And you can see evidence of it across many countries, especially in Europe, which is also hurting, just like we're hurting. I don't know if it reached India, but I'm curious to know whether or not the movement is catching fire.
It will catch everywhere. By the way, there was a very funny article in the paper. It says Tea Party. When they write Tea Party, they write it in lowercase. But when they write Occupy Wall Street, it is actually in capital letters. So now the writer asks, so why would there be a difference? How does the AP is the company
Associated Press, right?
That sends out all the headlines to all the newspapers, not only here, around the world. This is what how does the AP's Copy Brain Trust justifies this, the lowercase for Tea Party and uppercase for Occupy Wall Street. This is what these protesters call themselves, just the way the Tea Party always did. So there's no difference there. It should be capital. It seems to be a movement that has a lot of local manifestations. Well, just like the Tea Party. But why Tea Party in the lowercase? They sort of seem to share a philosophy of some sort. They have shared ideas. Same with both the parties. Tea Party is now getting respect even though both parties are listening to them, scared of them. These both parties have not been scared of any of us. All the voters, they could not get their attention. And these Tea Party, 83 members of these Tea Parties, they can get both of these parties to come to the table.
Because it was new and fresh. It was a new and fresh idea. And I read something very interesting too. Many people are saying that this Occupy Wall Street movement is like a new kind of Tea Party, but for the liberals. You know, the original Tea Party started out as sort of a faction of the Republican Party, right? And so it attracted a lot of conservatives because they had these old-fashioned ideas and they were trying to promote traditional values, whatever that means. Well, the liberals are starting to flock to this Occupy Wall Street movement.
Unions are everywhere there.
And so what you're seeing is that maybe this phenomenon, this organic movement of people to gather and protest is actually like a Tea Party movement, but for the liberals, on the liberal side of the house. And actually, a couple of things here. Time magazine did a poll and found that more voters support the protesters than they do the Tea Party. Let me say that again. More voters support the protesters than the Tea Party. In other words, I think the Tea Party movement is actually going to flame out to some degree, and you're going to see a resurgence.
No.
I think you are. I think there's evidence to show that to the effect. And not only that, I think the Tea Party suffers from the fact that it has an amorphous agenda. It stands for many things. In fact, it stands for maybe too many things, which is why it's hard for anyone to pin down what the Tea Party is really about.
Occupy Wall Street? It is actually following President Obama when he keeps talking about millionaires and billionaires, millionaires and billionaires. Every speech, millionaires and billionaires, he keeps beating on them. So the slogan of this Occupy Wall Street is, we are the 99%ers, because the 1%ers are the millionaires and the billionaires.
Right.
So that's how it started.
That's right.
But it has a lot of addition now. And yes, I saw one where the gentleman goes to the office, he finishes his work, he comes back, and he goes to the park to protest. He has a nice meal, free, and he sits there and he talks about, and if you ask him what's the problem, he'll say, I don't know. I am here, I'm supporting my brothers,
Well,
so it really doesn't have any purpose yet.
I disagree. I think the Occupy Wall Street's purpose is pretty clear. They're protesting anything that is an anti-common man, anti-poor people policy. I think this is going to be something we have to keep an eye on as we look towards the upcoming election. And the election has been picking up steam.
Yes.
We've had several debates now that have taken place, and it's been kind of interesting to see how quickly some of these candidates will seem to get into the limelight and then flame out. And of course, Michelle Bachmann did it. Sarah Palin did it. Rick Perry did it, right? They all kind of stood out in the front and center golden light for a little while, and then because of their terrible debate performances, they flamed right back out.
But you can't write off Rick Perry right now.
I think he's done.
Collected $17 million over 47 days. One of the things that's extremely
all
important.
the money in the world